Good people, welcome to the latest episode of Jonathan Thinks. I am your host, Jonathan Collins, your friendly neighborhood democracy scholar. I've got a few things on my mind, and maybe, just maybe, you've been thinking about them too. First thing on my mind, go New York, go New York, go. 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 The New York Knicks are your 2026 NBA champions. And look, I came on here last time and I talked about how excited I am for this moment, and it did not disappoint, right? Of course, I watched the entire series, but it was especially cool to be outside. My wife and I, we got a babysitter for game 5. We could feel that it was going to happen. We hit up a couple of spots in Harlem, and then if you go to my TikTok, my Instagram, I posted kind of live footage of the reaction from where we were. We were at Harlem Shake when OG Anunoby hit the big free throws to seal the game. And it was just electric. We walked around Lenox Avenue, and it was crazy. I have never been a part of something like that. And so it was particularly special for me. I have never lived in a city where the team has won the NBA championship. And for me, as a basketball supremacist, that's a big deal, right? So I have lived in places where championships have come to the city, right? I want to say the LA Kings won the Stanley Cup at one year when I was in LA. The Patriots won the Super Bowl while I was in New England. But the NBA basketball, this is my heart. And I've always wanted to be a part of something like this. I've always wanted to be in a city to just feel what it's like. And there's nothing comparable to this, to be in a city where the team hasn't won an NBA championship. This is one of the original franchises, right? And this team, the New York Knickerbockers, have not won an NBA championship until now since 1973. 53 years. And so it was electric. And like I said, what I love about this is that we can be loud about it. When you're on Lenox Ave and leading up to the epic Game 5, and especially after, go New York, go New York, go. I mean, it was just the excitement, the enthusiasm, the volume, right? And I want to say a quick thing too about this Knicks team in particular and Jalen Brunson. And what I liked about the team is there's no superstar on this team. There's no superstar. There's no mega, larger than life, super diva, ego, maniacal star on this team. They're a team of very good players with 2 excellent players in Karl-Anthony Towns and Jalen Brunson. And the thing about Jalen Brunson in particular that I love is that visually he's unassuming. He's about 6 foot. We're about the same height. He's not the quickest. He's not the fastest. He's not the most athletic. And yet in this game of giants, going up against the literal giant of the NBA in Victor Wembanyama, Jalen Brunson with just skill, technique, smarts, savvy, intangibles. Jalen Brunson prevailed using the things that you can teach, that you can learn, but that you have to put in the time and the effort to be able to do. And you have to have the mental toughness. Because that's the thing about New York City. There's the saying, if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. And you want to know why it's so difficult to make it in New York City? It's because it challenges you mentally, right? It challenges you mentally, psychologically. It's so expensive. It costs money to do everything, anything in New York City. And everybody here is trying to be somebody. And it weighs on you. But the beauty of New York City is that it always offers this opportunity that if you want to do something and you want to do it at the highest level, in epic fashion, in grand fashion, New York City is where you can do it, right? That's what brought me to New York City. I can be a political scientist anywhere. I can study race, politics, school governance, democracy, democratic governance, participatory democracy, deliberation. I can study these things anywhere. But when you have the ability to be a part of what's happening in a city like New York, when you can do participatory budgeting in schools in epic fashion, in grand fashion, oh, that's different. That's different. That's different. That's legacy. That's impact. That's reach, right? It's ordinary work. It's thankless work. It's hard work. But if you do it here in New York City and you do it well, you do it with excellence, oh, buddy, you change the conversation. And that's what Jalen Brunson just did. He changed the conversation, right? Everybody is bringing up that Becky Hammond quote that a small guard can never be a 1A on a championship team. He changed the conversation. Again, work ethic, skill, being excellent at his craft. That was the formula. Not elite athleticism, not hitting the genetic lottery and growing to be 7'5". Grit, determination, mental toughness, and being a leader of men who all had their eye on the same goal. And the discipline. And there's one quick thing that I want to say about the discipline, because something that's interesting, a trend that I noticed. So I looked this up. So Jalen Brunson wins Finals MVP. And if you know anything about Jalen Brunson, his personal life, he's married with a kid. You don't see Jalen Brunson out at clubs. You don't hear about Jalen Brunson in tabloids. He seems to live a very modest, domestic life. I hoop, I'm home with my family, I'm chilling, that's it. Not what you would expect from a man making $30 million and living in New York City, but that's how he kicks it. And I got curious and I wanted to know, well, what were the previous Finals MVPs like? And I looked this up. If you go back to 2018, 2018 is the year that Kevin Durant wins his second of back-to-back Finals MVPs. And then from 2019 until now, I think that's 8 Finals MVPs total. You'll notice a trend that all but one of those Finals MVPs are married with a kid or in a very long-term relationship. They're partnered up, they're booed up, they have their kids, they have their family, they hoop, they take care of business on the court, and then they live a very disciplined life outside of that. I'll read you the list. Kawhi Leonard, LeBron James, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Stephen Curry, Nikola Jokic. The one outlier, Jaylen Brown, then Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and Jalen Brunson. Discipline, focused. We're seeing a different NBA. Now the guys who are successful, mid-20s, late 20s, early 30s, locked in, being fathers, being men, being role models, being examples, and taking that maturity and using it to generate excellence on the basketball floor. So as we celebrate this Knicks victory, this epic championship, this historical moment, I hope we take away the lessons that are bigger than basketball, right? Because I loved watching this Knicks team play. They played together. They played for each other. But there was something about watching number 11. I've always been a Jalen Brunson fan since he was at Villanova winning national championships. He's a lefty, so I always gravitate to the lefty players. I never understood why he got drafted in the second round. Anybody that can lead their team to 2 national championships in college, to me, obviously deserves a shot in the NBA. I knew he would be good. I didn't think he would be this good, but I did know that he would be good. And so I'm glad to see the success that was always on the board for him, always in the cards. I'm glad to see him finally get that success. But don't just look at what he does as a basketball player, because I think what's happening around him as a man directly contributes to what you see on the basketball court. So congratulations to the New York Knicks. I'm going to try to get to this parade. We'll see how that goes. It's going to be crazy. But man, what a moment for the city. Go New York, go New York, go! The next thing on my mind is that surreal UFC event on the White House South Lawn, because it feels like more than a fight card. So if you're unfamiliar, what happened recently is, this past weekend on Donald Trump's 80th birthday, they had UFC Freedom 250, and it was the first professional sporting event to take place at the White House. There was an entire UFC fight card that basically took place at the White House. They had Joe Rogan and blanking on this Cormier corresponding. I even heard that they had correspondents in the green room, which is supposed to be, for like making decisions about war, and they have like regular commentators in here. So, there's like some unseriousness to it. But, there's a couple of interesting things about this UFC Freedom 250 whole event that I wanted to talk about. Because one thing that is interesting is that President Trump is using a very popular sport, which is UFC fighting, a sport that I think reaches multiple socioeconomic groups, right? Like, this is working class, middle class, the wealthy. It's the rare cultural pastime that brings together people across class. And they're bringing people together around the idea of patriotism and love of country, right? And that part I think is actually useful. And that's something that I think the Democrats have to do a better job at counterbalancing, because, Donald Trump and the MAGA movement and Republicans have somehow created a monopoly on love of country. And, this idea that Republicans are more patriotic than Democrats is ridiculous because, well, I I love a graph. So I actually wanted to try to measure this. It's actually really hard to find a measure of patriotism because we don't really ask that on surveys. We don't ask how much you love America. And so I use just a feeling thermometer towards the military over time as a proxy for patriotism. And you'll see that one, Democrats and Republicans aren't very different in their level of patriotism over time using this proxy. Again, imperfect proxy, but it's a proxy. And then two, not only are Democrats and Republicans similar, but Americans across racial groups are pretty similar as well. And even when you break it down and look at Democrats across race and Republicans across race, again, virtually no real differences here. The upshot is that Democrats are just as patriotic as Republicans. Black folks are just as patriotic as white folks. But for some reason, the Republican Party had a better PR story on the love of country. And I think that creates a problem. It creates a problem because not only do Republicans get branded as patriots, but then you see the dark side of what happens with this UFC Freedom 250 event, which is using patriotism as a smokescreen to engage in very, very shady behavior. So as great as it is to celebrate love of country and to do it in a way that brings in a pastime that I think Americans can really connect to, again, going back to the Knicks thing, what I love most is that the Knicks playoff run to the finals in this championship has the city of New York feeling connected, right? When I walk through the streets and if I'm wearing Knicks gear or I'm wearing, a Knicks hat, shirt, I guarantee you somebody's going to give me some energy. Somebody's going to say something. There's going to be some moments that show that we are connected, right? There is community forming around this. It's not tight community. We don't, it's not leading to new friendships or anything like that. Just like moments of camaraderie and togetherness that I think are very important. And so when you do something like hold a UFC event on the South Lawn, in theory, you're doing some of that same stuff too. The issue is when you do this and what you're really doing is making money off corporate sponsorships, paying fighters bonuses in crypto Bitcoin stuff that's owned by the Trump family. That's right. There is the Bitcoin crypto money that fighters were being paid bonuses in comes from an investment company that is housed under a trust in the name of the Trump children. And so you got these shady crypto companies and you have it streamed on Paramount Plus when the CEO of Paramount Plus has this, Dave Ellison has this relationship with Trump. You got Dave Ellison from Paramount Plus. You got Mark Zuckerberg from Meta, Facebook. You got the CEO of Crypto.com, Chris Marzelek. They're in attendance at the event. You got logos from Polymarket, Steak, Bud Light. I mean, it's just this event created the conditions for so much money to be exchanged, or not even exchanged, for so much money to be loaded into the pockets of the one percenters who are already rich, that what is marketed as patriotism is actually really the Trump administration once again playing in our faces. And to put the icing on the cake, and I want to mention this, but I actually don't want to, my point is to actually not get too fired up about this, but it's going viral. There's a story of the fighter who yells out, Michelle Obama is a man. And you're going to hear a lot of people be upset about this. And it's because there's a deep history there, right? Like this goes back to, early 20th century minstrel shows, the stereotype of the Black woman as masculine, as a way to desexualize, to dehumanize the Black woman, and to justify violence against Black women. And so the remark is particularly painful, especially when you connect it to the larger history. Interestingly, I found there's a really interesting research paper by a couple of scholars at Rutgers, and they looked at police stops, stop and frisk data. And it found that in the stop and frisk data, Black women were significantly more likely than white women to be mischaracterized as men. And they were also more likely to be mischaracterized as heavy. Their description was more likely to be different from their actual body type. And they brought in the actual BMI, body mass index, information of the folks in the data set who were stopped and frisked to show that it was actually between a 36 to 72% chance that Black women would be mischaracterized and seen as bigger and heavier than they really are. And again, more likely to be mischaracterized as men instead of women. And they're also more likely to be stopped and policed inside of buildings as opposed to where stops typically happen, which is outside in public, suggesting that Black women are surveilled inside of private spaces as opposed to solely just being policed in public spaces. And so when you hear the comments like Michelle Obama is a man, it's not about Michelle Obama. It's about the effect on the stereotype of Black women as masculine, the effect that stereotype has had on everyday Black women for decades, really since African slaves touched the soil. And I say all that to say something that actually probably doesn't make sense, but I promise you it's important. And that is, what was said about Michelle Obama was hurtful. It was painful. And yet I'm urging you, please resist the rage bait. Do not take it. Resist the rage bait, because that's what they want. They want us to be reactive to words and symbols, and they want us to ignore policies, practice, and the distribution of resources or the hoarding of it. They want us talking about Michelle Obama. They don't want us talking about corporate greed, corporate sponsorships, rising inequality, right? Continued inflation, the continued decline in Black opportunity, Black unemployment, lack of access to wealth, to generational wealth. They don't want us talking about these things. They want us talking about this idiotic and hurtful, deeply hurtful, but idiotic statement. And I'm begging you, resist the rage bait. And speaking of resisting the bait, that gets to the last thing I'm thinking about, which is this story about Byron Donalds. So Byron Donalds, a congressman from Florida who's running for governor of Florida, recently went viral because he held a press conference to announce a literacy initiative that he wants to implement if he's elected as governor of the state of Florida. And quite hilariously, my man had a spelling error on the sign. And you can't make this up. My man is trying to launch a literacy initiative because he's saying that the kids in Florida can't read. And he's making this announcement from a podium where the name of the initiative is misspelled. And they've been killing him on the internet. And I'm not going to lie, I've been enjoying every second of it because he looks like a complete idiot. But I want to urge us to resist only making the jokes, because what is, to me, even more interesting is the part that's not funny. And that's him saying, as my brother, Dr. Nicolai Corte, says on his show, A More Perfect Union, where I am a resident democracy scholar. So tune in. But something that my brother, Dr. Nicolai Corte, says often, which is the quiet part out loud. And if you look at the full story around this new literacy initiative that Byron Donalds is pushing, it stems from the fact that the recovery scorecard that is a part of that big data initiative from Harvard and Stanford that has been tracking student achievement pre and post-COVID, and the decline or the lack of post-COVID recovery, guess what? It's looking wicked in Florida. They are dead last in reading recovery. Dead last. So this is the same Florida where DeSantis has been leading the charge of the war on woke. The Anti-Woke Act, right, was the first codified piece of legislation that started all this stuff. Anti-CRT, critical race theory, all the xenophobia, all the transphobia. It was Florida where they got rid of black studies, African American studies. All this culture war stuff, Florida was the hotbed. And guess what? You've been doing all this culture war stuff and your kids can't read. And I'm not taking, I don't take pride in that. I don't find solace in that. That is painful to me because that's been my problem with this culture war stuff the whole time. It's like you guys want to attack critical race theory. You guys want to attack African American studies and black education. You guys want to attack diversity, equity, and inclusion. You want to attack anything that seems to remotely benefit black children. And guess what? None of your kids can read. Black, white, none of your kids can read. And you know what Byron Donalds is asking for? He's pushing for a literacy reform that embraces the science of reading. He's asking for Title I funding from the Department of Education, from the federal government, from the Trump administration to go towards schools, especially high poverty schools. He's asking for tutoring support. He's asking for early intervention at the pre-K level. He's asking for all the things that the research tells us matters because they tried all the culture war stuff. They tried all the xenophobia stuff. They tried all the anti-black stuff. And guess where they got you? Illiteracy, statewide. And so now you're sitting up here with the sign misspelled, begging for the federal government to give you the resources that we have been telling you you needed to be doing the whole time. So the sign is funny, but the story is tragic. And so I hope that more conservatives who want to wage this culture war see what's happening in Florida and open their eyes. Because if you don't, you're going to be looking just as goofy as the dude with the misspelled sign. And that, good people, concludes this episode of Jonathan Thinks. Again, I am Jonathan Collins, your host and friendly neighborhood democracy scholar. Remember that every time we convene, it's an opportunity to grow. We do it with love. We do it with joy. We do it together. These were a few of my thoughts. And who knows, maybe, just maybe, you were thinking about them too. Until the next time, peace and go New York, go New York, go!